Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone joining us from different parts of the world today. Welcome to today's webinar, which is on Clean Air Shared Solutions, launch of the Low-Cost Air Quality Monitoring Toolkit and panel discussion, hosted by the UNDP Global Center for Technology, Innovation, and Sustainable Development in Singapore, with AirGradient as our knowledge partner. My name is Nasala Maharjan, and I currently support the UNDP Global Center, and I'll be taking you through the session today. I'll be your host for the session. Thank you again very much for joining us. We are in time for a very important discussion, a very timely discussion around air pollution, one that has deeply local consequences around us. It affects our health, our environment, our economies, and everyday lives. And while much of the conversation does revolve around technical, science-based, data-driven solutions, it is equally important to engage stakeholders who are often less tech-savvy or less directly involved in these discussions, which means particularly communities themselves. So empowering communities to understand air quality data, and use it for advocacy is very critical for, of course, building inclusive and sustainable pathways towards cleaner air. The Low-Cost Air Quality Monitoring Toolkit, which is the meat of our discussion today, was co-developed precisely in response to that realization. So today's event, I believe, not only is just the launch of this toolkit, but also a broader discussion on how civil society, communities, and partners can work together to basically engage citizens and empower them for collective action for cleaner air. As you can see on your screen, we have an exciting program today. We have a lineup of great diverse experts working in this sector, and we will be beginning with opening remarks, followed by a presentation on the toolkit and its pilot implementation, then moving on to a panel discussion focused around empowering communities for cleaner air, and thereafter we will have an open question and answer segment after the panel discussion. We also have a short Q&A session right after the presentation, so I encourage everyone to tune in and post their questions as we go along. I will be introducing each speaker as we move through the agenda. But just before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. If possible, please do keep your videos on because we would love to see your faces virtually. And please do keep yourselves muted unless you're speaking during the question and answer round. This session is being recorded and will be shared with registered participants after the event. And again, just to reiterate, we encourage you all to use the Q&A function to submit the questions because we do want it to be an interactive session for you all. We'll try to accommodate as many questions as possible, and we hope you really find this session insightful today. So to start off, to open today's event, I'm very happy to invite our first keynote speaker, Carla Gomez, who is the acting head of the UNDP Global Center in Singapore. She also leads the climate and sustainability portfolio at the center, where she works with governments and partners on issues around carbon pricing, air pollution, and sustainable agri-food value chains. It is my pleasure to invite Carla to deliver her opening remarks. Over to you, Carla.
Thank you very much, Nasala, for that introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, wherever you are right now, and thank you very much for joining us today. For us, for me especially, it's a pleasure to be here because I see this is the first culmination of the project that we started 1 year ago. In 2024, with the support of the Ministry of Sustainability and Environment and the Open Innovation Platform of IMD8, we launched an innovation challenge. We had one specific goal that was how we can support communities to access to better local data that allows them to make better decisions, data that allows them to understand what is happening in the air that they breathe every day. And we have different questions, how we can do it, who are these players that are already doing this, so how we connect with them. So at the Global Center, we say, okay, the best angle that we can do this is by running an innovation challenge and identify different actors, innovators, the private sector who is already working on this, because we know that if we are gonna do something meaningful, we need to work in partnerships and with the private sector as well. So after launching this innovation challenge, we received different proposals. And then I remember clearly last year, I received a video from AirGradient of 1 hour explaining them their mission, why they do this. And after reviewing all the proposals, we felt that AirGradient has this vision and this alignment that UNDP also shares. On one side, they are open source. On the other side, they care a lot about the mission of air quality. And they see this not just as a product, but they see as how we can empower communities. So I'm very happy to share this, this event today with Achim, with Anika. You will meet them later because I think the launch of this toolkit has been thanks to them and the work that have been put in. So we came with this idea, and we also, during this journey, we had the support of the National Environment Agency of the government of Singapore. My colleague Caroline is not here, but she was the one that was leading us as an air pollution expert on the process, how we can do this, how we can create a toolkit that is easy to understand, that, for example, schools can open the toolkit and they can have the different resources and they can understand and see, okay, what is happening in my community, how I can advocate for better air. So with that in mind, we started putting together different pieces, but we know that one of the most important part was where we are going to implement this, who are going to be these early movers that are going to support us during the process. So we were very lucky to find during the journey our country office in Vietnam, led by my colleague Anne, who support and say, hey, yes, in Vietnam, we want to do this. We want to run with you this pilot and see what is support communities, how we can test it, the different manuals, the videos. So it's how this project came to life. And today, after 1 year, it's a culmination of this process or a lot of testing, trying to understand what is useful, what is not useful, what are the resources that are there. And for us, launching this local what does it mean? We want to bring these materials, we want to bring all these resources to all the communities, to all the people that are working for better air. And we know that this is going to empower them to have more actions and see what it can do to work better in community. So it's a little bit the process that we had before that. During the session today, we are gonna explain more with the different actors how was the development of the toolkit, how it was conceived, what are the different parts that it also has, because for us it's important that we explain what are the resources that are available, what you can find there. For us, how we measure success is if this toolkit is used by communities, by other countries, by different actors who are needed. So this is the first part that we want to do with the dissemination. And we really want to that you be part of this as well, that you help us to disseminate the toolkit that we have, and noting that this is open source and is for you to use it. That I think I want to introduce.
Thank you. Thank you, Carla. Thank you once again for setting the scene so powerfully, and of course, addressing this very complex and urgent challenge of air pollution requires this systems thinking and inclusive participation. Let me now invite our next opening speaker, Achim, the CEO and co-founder of AirGradient. He founded AirGradient in 2019 and has since been steering the company's strategic vision, pioneering affordable, open source, and accurate air quality monitoring solutions. And very happy to see that now it's empowering thousands of users across more than 70 countries. And of course, participate, co-partnering with us in this toolkit development. So please, Achim, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Nasala, for the introduction. It's great to be here. It has been a lot of work we put into this toolkit over the last 12 months, and I would also say we put a lot of love into it. And I want to connect to something that actually Carla mentioned. So when we did this application, I think probably we broke our records with the 1-hour video. But we felt when we saw the invitation to this challenge that this is just a perfect fit. And I want to explain a little bit. I mean, Carla mentioned already there was a strong alignment from the start with our mission, with our philosophy. And I want to bring you a little bit back into the time to give you some background information how this actually came to be. So I'm originally from Germany. I had a long career with Siemens. And if you work for an international company, they tend to send you around the world, and I love to travel. So my last station was in Bangkok, in the heart of Bangkok on the 32nd floor. I had an extremely demanding job. I was traveling like 3 out of 4 weeks worldwide. And at some point I felt I don't want my kids to call me uncle. So let's take a break. And my kids from their primary school in Bangkok, they got to know a school in northern Thailand, and they said they like it. And then we thought, okay, we forced the kids to move with their parents. Let's do it the opposite way. So we actually moved with the kids to northern Thailand because, they wanted to have something there. And then I did a lot of volunteering at my children's school. I ran robotics classes. I was parents president and just, wanted to do something else. And then in 2019, the so-called burning season hit really, really, really hard. So it was a thing that, people were used to, people knew. The school had air purifiers in place, but 2019, it's still actually a year that people in Bangkok still talking about it. It was a massive, massive air pollution season, and the school didn't know, are the classrooms safe? Do the air purifiers work well enough? I still remember it was actually the only year that we actually evacuated. So we went we flew out from Chiang Mai to Bangkok, and one time they actually closed the airport 2 hours after we left because of too little visibility. So just to give you an idea, and we put 4 air purifiers into one bedroom and put tape around the windows and still weren't able to really bring the air quality down. So this is really in our DNA. So we then basically started, okay, how can we help the school? Okay, so the head of school was running around with a meter, trying to make sense of the classrooms, and my co-founder with his technology background and me, we thought, okay, let's build some monitors, sensors, put them into classrooms, make a small dashboard for the head of school so that he can see what's going on. That worked really well. We also built a lot of community. So we had very, very engaged parents. We did workshops with them. We invited firefighters onto the campus to also work with the children, telling them how they can also have experts, how they can actually protect themselves. We had also advocacy experts coming in, really teaching children, no matter how old you are, you have a right for clean air. And so this network grew and grew. Then other schools asked us, hey, can we build these sensors? So we put the build instructions, out on the internet. We made a small website. And so the whole thing got really, really a lot of traction. And at some point, I just didn't feel like I want to go back to my old job because I felt, okay, this is where we can have an impact. So we then founded AirGradient actually, I think 6 months or something like this after we actually started. We never had a business plan, and we really founded it to actually support this mission. And I think that's a very unusual start of a company, and it really explains a lot of, I think, coming back to why we are, I think, such a good fit for the toolkit. Yeah, on the one hand, obviously the open source approach, because air pollution is not something that a single company can solve. So we think the open source, all our products are open source hardware, really helps building capacity worldwide, and we don't mind sharing that information. It's also then about open data. So we are big proponents on open data. We are not monetizing any data. And I think also scientific rigor comes into this. With open source comes transparency, and we need to make sure, we need to prove that these devices work as expected. Yeah, so with this in mind, I think it really, and also this community focus with UNDP helping, cities, for example, to build the air quality network was really something that we immediately felt, okay, this is a great opportunity, probably for both sides. We can really make this more structured, what we are already working on, and help UNDP developing this toolkit. Yeah, so that is my little introduction. Just one more big thank you for the whole team at UNDP. Also, I think the people at AirGradient that were working for this. I think the outcome was really great, and I hope you will see a lot of that in the next 70 minutes or something like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Achim. Thank you for taking us through the start of the journey. It's quite interesting, but at the end of the day, it is accessibility focused, impact driven. So very interesting to note. Let us now dive into the core of today's webinar, which is the toolkit and the pilot implementation. We will be, looking at the presentation from Dr. Anika Krause and Anne to deliver the presentation. By way of introduction, Anika is a PhD graduate from the University of Cambridge, specializing in air pollution exposure science. At AirGradient, she works on improving sensor accuracy through rigorous evaluation and close collaboration with leading research groups in air quality monitoring. And Anne brings extensive experience working across global teams. Her work has spanned economic mobility, human capital development, innovation, sustainable development, and currently she's serving as the head of exploration at UNDP Vietnam. Just a reminder that following the presentation, we will have a short Q&A session, so please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box. So over to you, Anika and Anne, for taking us through the presentation.
Thank you very much, Nasala, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. I have now the honor to I'm just gonna share my screen to introduce you to the star of the event, the low-cost air quality monitoring toolkit. And I think Achim, Carla, and Nasala have already introduced the topic very well and introduced the problematic very well. So I will focus on what exactly is actually the toolkit, because maybe this is still a little bit abstract for you. And then I will pass on to Anne, who will then talk about the pilot project in Hanoi, where we applied the toolkit or tested the toolkit for the first time. So, as many of you will probably already know, we have the problem of a data gap in air quality monitoring. So traditionally, air quality monitoring is done with monitoring stations. These are expensive to set up, but also expensive to maintain. You usually need technical experts for the operation and also for the data generation and interpretation. And that's one reason, like all these kind of costs, all these requirements, why not all cities or local organizations can afford such stations. So, and that's then the reason why we have these gaps in air quality data. So there are many regions or cities in the world where we actually don't really know the local or real-time air quality. Low-cost air quality monitors can address this, so they are more affordable and they require less maintenance. So that makes them accessible to a wider range of communities. And because they're more affordable, you can have more of them. You can have a denser network, so you can also get a more detailed idea of air quality, so higher spatial and temporal resolution in a place. But there are also still concerns regarding their accuracy, and I think they're justified. So these monitors should be calibrated, for example, usually. And well, if you have more monitors, you also have more data. So this fact of data handling, management, interpretation, that can still be complicated. So these two factors can again limit the accessibility for local communities, especially if you don't have any technical experts in your team. And that's exactly already, as Nasala said, where the air quality monitoring toolkit comes in. So it has been developed by AirGradient and the UNDP Global Center in Singapore. And it is a free and open source resource that should empower communities with all the knowledge needed to plan, set up, and manage an air quality monitoring network, and this in an affordable and accurate way. So no technical expertise is needed for this. So specifically, we aim for providing a practical way to generate local air quality data, especially in those places where we have experienced this gap still, where we don't have data yet or just limited data. We want to simplify the processes that you need to collect such data so that anyone can basically build up an air quality monitoring network. And in the long term, of course, we hope that this helps communities to advocate for cleaner air, to have reliable data to inform decisions, policy making, and awareness raising. So who is the toolkit for? Well, governments and local municipalities are definitely some users who can benefit from that. Not all municipalities or governments have technical air quality experts, so we hope that our resources can support them there. But also, just basically engaged citizens, advocacy groups, NGOs, citizen scientists, or schools, anyone who wants to raise awareness or is motivated to fight against air pollution is included and is hopefully supported by the toolkit. And also private companies can use it, for example, to improve their workplace environment. The key features are, as I already mentioned, capacity building. So we want to enable people to set up an affordable and accurate monitoring network without needing any technical experience or qualifications. We focus a lot on high data quality, so it includes instructions, for example, on calibration and data quality assurance. Of course, it needs to be affordable. So as we already mentioned, it's open source, it's free, and it is tailored to low-cost sensors, so to maximize the affordability of this method. And as I also said, it's open source, so we also make sure that the data really stays, or the ownership really stays with the organization or the user of that network. All right, so I think we were still a little bit more abstract, so I want to give you a bit more of a concrete idea what is actually in the toolkit. So, of course, we need air quality monitors. So this toolkit is tailored to AirGradient monitors because this is what we know best, but it can also be used with any other low-cost monitors, and I will come back to that. And then we have very comprehensive documentation and guides that helps from the planning to the setup and operation. I will also get a little bit into more detail what this comprises. But to keep it not too text heavy, we also developed or recorded some videos that summarize some chapters and give you a kind of an easy, quick start into different topics and should help you not to have to read too much, basically, and to make it a bit more interactive. And talking about interactive, we also have interactive tools in the toolkit that should help you with, for example, decision-making or learning how to interpret data. And last but not least, we also have a dashboard and analytical tools that help you with, for example, the calibration or the visualization of data that can be, especially if you have a lot of data, that can become very complex very soon. And we want to enable people to still work with the data, even though they don't know any programming languages or statistical programs. So to make it really as straightforward as possible. So when we come to the documentation, as I already said, it covers planning, setup, and operation, and that is exactly the three parts that we also structured our toolkit in. So if we look at the chapters in each section, you can see that we cover very diverse topics. For example, how can you get your community engaged, which is an important point that can really make a difference in your project, and also how to keep it engaged later when your toolkit is running. There are aspects like data quality, for example, over the monitor calibration or maintaining data quality and accuracy. Then there's also lots of practical chapters, for example, how to mount your sensor, how to connect it to the internet, how to maintain the sensors. These chapters can be sensor specific. And therefore, and then I said, you can also use this toolkit, which with non-AirGradient monitors. So we also give some guidance how to do that. And this would then look like this. So some chapters would fall out, which are very sensor specific. You basically would need to replace them with the user manuals of the sensors you are using. But all of the chapters you're seeing now are still applicable, like universally applicable to planning an air quality project and also performing successful project here. All right, and lastly, I want to just give you even more concrete examples of our toolkit. So I picked a snippet of a video. This is in the planning phase. So even before you bought your monitors, you define your aim and you define which sensors are actually best to use and where should I place them. And here we can see the introduction of this video. So let's have a look.
Want to get serious about understanding air quality? It all starts with being strategic with your location and which monitor to use. Choosing the right spots for your air quality monitor is the absolute foundation of accurate and useful data. Poorly placed monitor, they give you bad data, and bad data leads to wasted time, resources, and misunderstanding of what's really happening with your air. But with careful planning, you can collect data that truly reflects the air quality you want to measure and make a real difference in your community. This video will guide you through the key steps. First, think about your project goals. What are you trying to measure? Regional pollution across the whole city or local hotspots? Your goals dictate where you place your monitor. Then come the practical.
Okay, so this was just a little snippet from the video. It goes on for another 3 minutes or so. So most videos take about 3 to 5 minutes, and they all represent one chapter of the toolkit. And then I also wanted to give you an example of one of our interactive tools. So this is again the same topic. Again, how to select the monitors, how to select the sites in your planning phase. And here you can see that it asks you a couple of questions. What is your primary goal? What are your conditions in your region? Do you have a reliable power available? Is there Wi-Fi available? Because this is, of course, all important when it comes to monitor selection. And then it keeps on asking, where do you want to monitor specifically, and what is your budget? And if you made your way through this little tool, it then gives you a recommendation, what monitors would be best for you, gives you some advice on your site selection, and also generates a checklist that you can then download and use during your deployment. So these little tools should help you to, not having to read too much documentation and to guide you through the process of setting up your network. All right, so I hope I gave you a bit more of a clear idea what the toolkit actually is. And now I want to hand over to Anne, who will introduce you to our pilot project.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Are you guys able to see the slides on the screen now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, perfect. So good evening, everyone, or morning, afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for taking the time to join us today to discuss, really what's important to us all, which is the air that we breathe. So following the excellent overviews that's been shared by my colleague, I'd like to talk a little bit about what we did when we implemented this pilot on the ground here in Hanoi. I'll be sharing kind of what we discovered through the pilot and most importantly, how this impacted our participants and their communities. So Fundamentally, as Carla, Nasala, Achim has shared, this initiative is really aimed at developing this package, which includes the sensors and the accompanying toolkit or instruction manuals that can be deployed without technical expertise by local communities. So we really wanted to test the feasibility of this in a real-world setting, in a beautiful place, but slightly polluted, called Hanoi. And at the outset, we had several questions that we wanted to answer through the pilot. So firstly, can communities actually deploy these sensors by themselves without expert support? We also wanted to hear from users what their actual experiences are and if they have any feedback on how to improve the sensors and the toolkits that were being developed. Thirdly, we're interested in what users were learning from the monitoring and all the data that was generated. And through all of this, really, we want to get to the crux of whether these are useful tools for community engagement on air quality, whether it's for advocacy, whether it's for motivating personal actions to reduce air pollution, or to take protective measures for their health. So overall, our goal is to engage with the community on air quality with the sensors and the toolkit as key tools that facilitate this engagement. So let me walk you through how we implemented the pilot. So firstly, the toolkit itself was developed through a truly collaborative process. It was created in consultation with UNDP Singapore, the Global Center, AirGradient, UNDP Vietnam, and air quality champions and experts from across the world. Importantly, through this process, we also worked with air quality experts and students here in Vietnam. They were involved in the consultation process to help refine the toolkit to Vietnamese language and cultural context. For the sensor deployment themselves, we worked together with 14 participants. Among these, we had many university students who were studying environmental management. We also included other non-specialists, basically regular people without background knowledge on this topic, because we really wanted to test whether these sensors and the toolkit could be deployed by really anyone in the community. We had a number of different devices. We had AirGradient's usual device that's powered by electricity that runs on Wi-Fi. We had some indoor sensors, as well as a newly developed module by AirGradient that was running on solar panels. And we strategically placed these different devices across different environments, urban versus rural areas, indoor versus outdoor locations, to really capture the full picture of air quality variations across Hanoi, as you can see here on this map. This would also enable our participants to see the variations in air quality, and we encourage them to follow their curiosity on this topic and use the diverse data that was being generated to help answer some of their questions on air quality in Hanoi. Here are just some pictures of unique Hanoi landscapes where the air quality sensors were being deployed. I think one of the pictures is outside of the University of Science here in Hanoi. Anyways, so one of the essential questions we had was, can people do this themselves? And I'm pleased to report that the answer was largely yes. Most of the participants were able to set up the devices without expert help. And this is exactly what we're hoping for when this was being designed. The toolkit and the sensors are designed to be accessible, and this proved to be the case for the participants in our cohort. However, I think there were some practical challenges that our users encountered. For example, power source reliability was an issue. So sensors would go offline when the power was interrupted, for example. Wi-Fi connectivity may be an issue in some locations. So the maintenance of ongoing Wi-Fi connection also posed some challenges, particularly in rural locations. And then in addition to this, we asked the participants what they think could be improved. So we were really impressed by what they were able to come up with, how engaged they were in not only identifying what the potential problems are, but also, coming up with possible solutions. So this really goes to show how engaged the participants were in this. And what they shared with us was that they wanted a simpler, maybe perhaps more intuitive toolkit. Even though most could set up the devices themselves, they felt that the documentation could be a bit clearer. They had mentioned perhaps having a dedicated mobile app that was easier for data monitoring. I guess the world is very mobile based these days, and people don't oftentimes, go online to open up a website, which is what they need to do at the moment. So they wanted something that they could quickly check on their phones, and also to get some alert notifications for when there's poor air quality, some kind of automatic warnings when the air quality deteriorates, so they don't have to themselves monitor the data by going on the website. And then I think another suggestion was to have an external display on the sensors, which I think AirGradient is already working on. So they're ahead of the curve on that one. And also the sensors helpfully generated a lot of useful data. The users saw the potential of this data, but I think they wanted a little bit more support and training on how to better interpret the data and the trends that they were seeing. And perhaps even more exciting, a lot of our participants started to think creatively about how these sensors could be deployed, whether partially within the scope of the pilot or for future projects. And they shared with us that they wanted to use these air quality sensors to monitor air quality in Vietnam during the rice straw burning seasons. They wanted to measure pollution levels in craft villages where small industries that were highly polluting operate. They wanted to compare exposure across the different modes of transportation, whether you're taking a Grab motorbike or whether, you're on a bus. So, I mean, really what this goes to show is that our users were engaged in how these technologies can help potentially solve the air quality issue or highlight some of the challenges on air quality in their local communities. Right. So we know that one of the major advantages of low-cost sensors is that they generate this hyperlocal air quality monitoring data. And we have some participants, thankfully, who are pursuing studies in environmental management and had some research questions that they wanted insights from through the data. And this is what they found. So firstly, the recorded PM 2.5 levels in Hanoi frequently exceeded the safe limits for air quality. I think the average levels recorded, if I'm correct, is around 23 micrograms per cubic meter, much higher than the WHO recommended safe limit of 5 micrograms. And this, for context, was during the summer season in Vietnam, which has typically lower pollution levels than the winter. And also the sensors not only kind of showed the students that the air quality was bad, I think they also helped the students in part to understand what could potentially be driving some of these fluctuations because it was generating data in real time. So our participants shared that they had observed some links in terms of weather patterns. So on day with heavy rains, they saw that PM 2.5 levels dropped significantly as the rain, literally washed away the pollutants in the air, and conversely, on sunny days with no wind, they would see the pollution kind of climb back up to relatively higher levels. And actually, the participants also noticed certain spikes in PM 2.5 levels during periods that coincided with post-harvest burning in Hanoi. So this was pretty immediate, I think. And they could really see in real time how air quality changes with certain sources and weather patterns, whether it's during rush hour or in a more quiet period. And I think what's also interesting that the students have shared is that they were surprised to see that indoor air quality was not much better than outdoor air quality. While many had assumed that by staying indoors, perhaps closing windows, that would protect them from air pollution. But what they actually observed was that indoor air quality tracked closely with outdoor air quality, and in some cases, indoor was even more polluted. The data also, because we had some of the sensors placed in indoor areas versus outdoor areas, and then also indoor areas in urban areas versus indoor areas in rural areas, the data also revealed some fascinating differences between urban and rural areas. So looking at these graphs that were shared by the students, we see that air quality in rural areas was slightly better on average, not by much. This potentially makes sense with less traffic, less industry, fewer concentrated sources of pollution. However, what they noticed was that rural areas experience much higher spikes or variations in air quality, or PM 2.5 in this case, compared to urban areas. And they have several conjectures to why this might be the case. There could be, greater impact of open burning in terms of waste, in terms of agricultural waste in rural areas that are typically closer to the areas where burning occurs. And also there's potentially a structural factor in how the houses are built, and perhaps houses in rural areas tend to be more open with more windows, more ventilation, and therefore, it correlates and tracks the outdoor air quality a lot more. In contrast, urban buildings are a lot more closed and sealed, so maybe that's why you see some of those differences. And I think this was very interesting for the participants. They realized that air quality is not uniform across a city. So where you live, how your building is constructed, what activities happen nearby, these are all factors that can dramatically changes the air quality in your local area. So, moving quickly on to the impact. So data is valuable, if it leads to changes in awareness and behavior. So we also wanted to know what kind of impact the pilot had and the access to this data had on our participants. So before the pilot, a lot of our users reported thinking of air quality or air pollution really as kind of an abstract issue. So they knew that it was a problem, but it was distant, it was theoretical. I mean, air, unless it's really bad, is typically invisible. But once they had access to their own local data, they could clearly observe the links between certain polluting activities and air quality in real time. So they saw the air quality spiked during certain hours of the day or when burning activities were happening around them. This really kind of concretized this issue of air pollution to our users. And what they also reported was that, there's been some changes in their behavior as a response to having access to this data. Our users reported checking air quality before undertaking outdoor activities. It's used to help them make decisions, such as whether they should exercise outside. Is today a day where they should wear a mask, for example? And the users themselves also reported trying to limit activities that contributes to air pollution, such as burning joss paper or burning of waste, and prioritizing public transport where possible. And then what we also see is, in terms of community engagement, a lot of the users reporting discussing air quality a lot more frequently with friends and family. And I think this is a very, very positive development. Air quality became a topic of regular conversation. They were sharing information on PM 2.5 levels, on AQI readings, and what they were learning with others in their community. And one interesting insight that one of the users shared with us was that the pilot had completely changed his view on who should engage in this problem. So he shared with us that he used to think that air quality monitoring and resolving this issue was really the sole role of the government. But through this pilot, he really saw the power of engaging the community so that local communities themselves can understand what's happening in their local area, be informed, and also be part of the solution. And this is exactly the kind of engagement that we're hoping to see. Okay, so moving on to kind of our key lessons that we took away from this pilot in Hanoi. We learned that increasing awareness and engagement is possible through cost-effective interventions and tools such as low-cost sensors. It's literally in the name. These sensors are not expensive. The setup is not too complicated, and the deployment led to greater awareness, engagement, and behavior change. And secondly, this is really important. So we know that imperfect data is better than no data. Now, these sensors are not going to be as precise as, expensive reference stations, although we know that it's pretty darn close. I think this data, however, provides the basis for people to conceptualize the problem of air quality, of air pollution, and making tangible what was perhaps more abstract and invisible. And now, with the ability to track, to quantify, and see in real time what's happening to air quality, it's what really motivates action for a lot of people. Thirdly, we also know that we knew that air pollution is a complex problem, but through this pilot, I think it clearly reinforces the need to have all stakeholders at the table to be part of the conversation and part of the solution. For Hanoi, this has been an extremely timely pilot. The city has frequently topped the list of most polluted cities in the world, and the government has really started to respond to these challenges in recent years and months. And some of the policies and interventions that are currently being proposed, such as, having a low emission zones where motorbikes with diesel will be restricted, recommendations to close schools and keep children at home on bad air days, the encouragement of public transportation use. These are all policies that actually require the support and compliance from communities. And this tool, obviously, amongst a host of other tools, is what we can use to engage with communities, giving them the information that's needed to understand why these policies matter, and when that's when real change is possible. So just to finish off, this was a very successful pilot in Hanoi, and from UNDP Vietnam's perspective, we do hope that this is replicated at scale in other locations, whether it's in Vietnam or in other countries around the world. I think there are a few elements that can help to build on our existing pilots, and these include perhaps some technical support. So while the participants could deploy the sensors independently, I think perhaps maybe having some support for maintenance or troubleshooting, maybe through a chat bot or a chat function, could be very helpful for users who want to get immediate help. We've already discussed the deployment of maybe even more user-friendly tools, such as a mobile app with an interface that community members, from your grandma, your neighbor, everyone can use and interact with. I think that would be good. And then I think one interesting insight that's also been shared is that the participants really want to engage with their local community on all the things that they've learned through the pilot. But they need a little bit of help in translating this technical data into something that's a little bit more accessible. So some of the ideas that they were able to share with us were, templates or infographics, simple reports that they can, post in their neighborhood or on social media, for example. And I think lastly, similar pilots could perhaps build in a small capacity building component, not necessarily on just the technical side or on deploying the sensors, but precisely how to understand the data, how to mobilize the community and share this data effectively. I think some training, perhaps to accompany the toolkits for the first movers, for the air quality champions in communities could be very helpful for this to further disseminate. And I think addressing some of these areas provides a clear path to hopefully replicating this around the world. So hopefully, we'll see these low-cost sensors in a lot more areas and helping communities and enabling them to have access to the data as well as to take action on this. So thank you very much, everyone, for your attention. I'm sorry, I think I've taken a few extra minutes of your time, but back to you, Nasala.
Thank you. Thank you to the both of you for that very clear and compelling presentation. It's always helpful when we see the practical aspects, not just the technical, theoretical aspects of the toolkit, but also how it came to play. So very helpful to note. I also see that we have many rich questions and comments regarding the presentation, the pilot. I see that perhaps we can group similar questions together. For example, we have a question on the technical compatibility. I believe it's relating to whether the toolkit would work with an air quality monitor that Mark has built himself using a Raspberry Pi 5. There's a question around accessibility and offline use, about how the toolkit chapters, the worksheets, the videos are whether downloadable or not, and if Wi-Fi access, since it's not really available in many countries, and that is the reality of many of these developing countries where we want to pilot these kinds of toolkits. And also around a lot on collaboration. So really, I would turn it to Anika and Ann if you'd want to respond to a few.
Yes, thank you. So when it comes to home-built sensors, for example, with Raspberry Pi, actually the toolkit is designed to be used with any kind of sensor. So there's definitely lots of content that can be useful. I just want to also make you aware of the fact that it's mainly designed for sensor networks. So if you have one individual monitor, then a lot of information might not be relevant to you, but there is still information, for example, on like the concepts of calibration and so on that you can use. The question from Paolo on is the toolkit downloadable is a very good one. Yes, we have PDF versions of the materials, but I see also that you were talking about the videos. And I think this is a great point that we also need to make them downloadable. And maybe connected also to the videos, someone asked if they are translated into French yet, and they're not, but this is definitely our plan. We want to translate them into different languages, or at least create captions in different languages, so that that we can that the accessibility increases. Was there more, Nasala, that I didn't answer?
I think you've covered it.
Maybe there was one on indoor and outdoor that I can also quickly answer. So while the toolkit is mainly focusing, like the documentation is focusing on outdoor networks, there is still, again, there are many general information that can also be used for indoor projects or indoor and outdoor projects. And yeah, if it comes to AirGradient, we offer both sensor types, so that shouldn't be an issue.
Thank you, Anika, for taking us to the answers as well. Just a reminder and a note to all the participants that we will be sharing the recording, and when we do, we will also share the link to the toolkit so that you can access that. It is downloadable, it's free to use, as Anika has already stressed. So we will be sharing the resources with you all. Great to see that there are so many collaborative interests. So please feel free to follow up, have those discussions, and we hope that this really, goes on to many more areas where it's really needed. So I think with this, we're really ready to dive into the second half of our webinar today, which is the panel discussion on empowering communities for cleaner air. So we saw that the presentation really highlighted the what and the how of the toolkit and the practical aspect of how it was implemented in Hanoi. So this panel will now allow us to go through the deeper into the why, the practical experiences of the people working in it, different other implementation linkages that are there, lessons learned from working with communities on the ground, and so much more that is yet to come. I'm very pleased to now pass the floor to Achim, who will be introducing our panelists and also moderating the discussion. Over to you, Achim.
Thank you, Nasala and Anika and Anne. Great presentation. And now I'm super honored to introduce the panel. People that I know, for some of them for many, many years. It feels a bit like family. So I want to start with Farah Kasi. She's project manager at the EPIC Air Quality Fund at the University of Chicago. Farah has nearly a decade of experience working at the intersection of community engagement, public health, and air quality. She leads initiatives supporting cities and governments and building the capacity and financing needed to improve air quality management, especially in low and middle-income countries. We work actually very closely with EPIC on many projects there. Then we have Dr. Colleen Rosales, Strategic Partnership Director at OpenAQ. Colleen holds a PhD in environmental science, has a deep expertise in atmospheric chemistry, monitoring technologies, and community science. At OpenAQ, she leads global collaborations that make air quality data more open, accessible, and actionable for communities and researchers around the world, as well as the OpenAQ Ambassador Program, which we are a big fan of. And finally, Associate Professor Dr. Hong An Le, lecturer and head of the Department of Environmental Management at the VNU University of Science in Hanoi. Dr. Le is a leading researcher in air pollution measurement, modeling, and emission analysis in Vietnam and Southeast Asia with extensive expertise connecting scientific findings to national and local decision making. So for this panel conversation, I want to go through a few key themes. And I would then like to invite each of the panelists to respond from their perspective, because I think we have a really interesting perspective from data, from the funding side, as well as from the scientific side. So let's start with something really basic. And it's basically what's missing, what's working, and how do we empower communities to make real progress. So with that, so I want to start with data gaps. Let's start maybe with Farah. Many countries still have significant gaps in their monitoring network, especially in outer cities, semi-rural areas, I think also in big areas in Africa, for example. So from your work, what are the most common reasons these gaps persist, even when air pollution is a major health burden there?
Thank you, Achim, for having me over for this webinar. And thank you so much for this question, though I think in part it has been covered in the presentation of, what these gaps look like. The journey of the EPIC AQ Fund began in 2023 when we launched a report. Essentially, we were trying to build a case for the fund to understand the global air quality landscape and what was missing, why was it missing. And we identified several causes for these data gaps. Largely, those can be organized into the following categories. The first major one was finances. So monitors are expensive. Even after installation, there are maintenance costs. You may need spare parts. You require trained personnel. So the reference grade monitoring stations especially require very specific kind of trained personnel to manage it, which makes it a very expensive or costly affair. In some countries, people had to pay to access air quality data. So even though the government in some countries was installing monitoring stations, they had to pay, even if it was a researcher in their own country, they had to pay to access data, though that was a very small chunk of the whole lot that I interviewed. But yes, finances and cost was a major burden. Second was, let's assume that we have the money. Do we have the capacity? Do we have technical experts to cover all of that, to take care and to manage? So that was another major gap that we found. Then infrastructure limitations. In many parts, especially as you move away from major urban centers, electricity is not consistent throughout the day. For some, it may be, on certain days of a week, there may be no electricity for a few hours or for more even. I think one of the participants mentioned that, there's no Wi-Fi in some parts of the country, which is a major challenge. So there may be weak internet connectivity or low internet connectivity. Then community awareness. We talk about all of, PM 2.5, air quality index. These are very simple terms, at least for us. But for an average citizen, they may not be able to relate to those terms or a lot of technical jargon that gets pushed down, especially during the months of winter when pollution tends to peak, and the media kind of picks it up from here and there with whatever little understanding they have. And the last one was stakeholder relationships. So basically, if there's a lack of coordination between the federal, state, and local agencies, it results in chaos. And that is also one of the major gap that we identified. So these were, the 5 major categories: finances, capacity, infrastructure limitation, limited or lack of community awareness, and stakeholder relationships.
Yeah, thank you, Farah, for those insights. I think that's also something I learned when we recently got a lot of projects in Africa, and certain infrastructure assumptions that even in Thailand were still working, just weren't working there. So it's always good to question these kind of perceptions that you have yourself. So I would like to continue with Colleen. So Colleen, OpenAQ aggregates air quality data from around the world. We actually also use it for our new mobile apps. So many thanks for providing that. From that global vantage point, what types of data gaps do you see most often? Is it in availability, accessibility, or openness? And what tends to drive those gaps?
Thanks, Achim. I think this is first best answered by showing our report that we did last year. So the global landscape report, where we looked at the global monitoring by governments in many different, in many different countries. And what we found here was that on the left, on the pie chart on the left, 36% of national governments are not monitoring air pollution. A little over half publicly share air quality data, and 27% share maximally open air quality data. So there is a percentage that doesn't monitor. There's a percentage that does monitor but doesn't fully share their data or doesn't share their data at all. And then there are those that do share their data in a fully open manner. And when I say fully open, this kind of touches on the gaps, and maybe we can look at it as opportunities as well in terms of sharing air quality data. The criteria that we mentioned here are physical units, meaning are they available in raw concentration units rather than air quality indices or other translated forms of air quality data? Is it available in physical coordinates or station-specific coordinates like latitude, longitude are available? And then there's also timely fine scale temporal information, meaning is it available in near real time or in a timely manner rather than being provided in a monthly or annual basis. And then lastly is programmatic access. And apologies for a lot of the typos there, but we're seeing that in terms of the openness of the data, the biggest gap is in the programmatic access, meaning many of the data are not machine readable or in interoperable formats. And this is one of the challenges that OpenAQ is trying to address as well, is being able to provide these data in a programmatically accessible way. And what we see, on the other hand, we see that the other criteria that are governments and many other monitoring capacities are able to fulfill are the physical units, the coordinates, and the timely fine scale provision of the data. So again, we can see this as either as gaps or opportunities, and this is where things could be improved in terms of the openness perspective. And then I think in terms of the gaps, Farah has already mentioned a lot, maybe, and I'll just touch on again on some of the things like limited monitoring networks on the ground, lack of internal capacity on different levels. And this is also what we saw in the global landscape report in many of the countries that we evaluated. And then all of this with the undercurrent of a lack of financial investment. For example, in Clean Air Fund's State of Global Air Quality Funding Report, they state that only 1% of international development funding went to clean air projects from 2019 to 2023. So again, there's a lot of opportunity there. And then the last point that I wanted to make was from the perspective of open data, there's a fear of negative public perceptions of open data. And when in reality, open data, as we saw from the presentations today, can really demonstrate accountability and responsiveness and correct many public misperceptions and increase public support for evidence-based intervention. So I'll stop there, but thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Colleen, for sharing these insights. One thing we struggle sometimes with 24-hour averages from reference stations, but that's a topic for another time. So I would like to turn to Professor Lee. In Vietnam and Southeast Asia, which data gaps pose the biggest scientific challenges? For example, is it more like spatial coverage, or is it about pollution types, source attribution, or more like the lack of long-term data sets, for example?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much and invite me enjoy with our meeting. And actually, thanks, Kim, so much from the AirGradient and also the UNDP Global Center in Singapore and in Vietnam to support the equipment and also the funds for us to conduct the experiment. And as a presentation from Anh, and we know that the air quality in Vietnam is so bad in Hanoi. Yeah, and a few days ago, we are the top number one of air quality index. It's very high, so that is the air quality that is the big problem in Vietnam. And along that, we have the biggest scientific data gap in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. Actually, are interconnected, but we can rank at we have discussed with other scientists in Southeast Asia also, and the conference. And we know that we face problem like the we lack of the data on the long term and high quality data sets. You know that to assess the air quality, we need the long term the right? And also the such problem about the high quality of data set. The most critical gap that from the data quality and time. And inconsistent monitoring and funding created fragments data, as I know, and crippling chain analysis and health study also, and climate modeling on the also some the air quality monitoring station is like up. And beside that, you know that maybe not only in Vietnam and Southeast Asia, but also in many countries in the world, we have a limited pollutant speciation, like the network measure basic. Because most of automatic air quality monitoring, we focus on common air pollutants with 6 common air pollutants, like the particulate matter, SOx, NOx, ozone, less what else is ozone, okay? And but rarely what is inside a particulate matter. That is big problem. We lost data. That's recently we have many projects focused on characteristic of particulate matter, like the what is the what is the iron and element compound in the particulate matter. And you know, I also have just finished the project on measure microplastic on the atmosphere, compound on the particulate matter. And recently we conducted the experiment to determine dioxin and furan on the particulate matter also, or something like that. But that is a short I mean the short-term project, not its long-term. So that is also a problem. And this times precise source identification and that it help for the health assessment also. And the third that we have a problem on the spatial coverage of the monitoring station, and monitoring is concentrated in the major of the city like in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, but we missing the rural area and sometimes it's the industry zone and transport pollution pathway also, and leading to an integrate a SPO picture and to understand about the problem, what are the where the air quality, what air pollution is moving to our city. And of course, I would like to say that we have a which emission inventory. You know that on the reply that we need to finish the emission inventory 2 years ago, but actually now is the limited of city. It's finished that program, so very difficult to know where how it's the estimate of air pollution from source like the traffic or agriculture or in from the domestic waste burning. In Hanoi nowadays, very popular with the problem about the biomass burning and air pollution from the craft release and from transportation or from the municipal solid waste burning also. So I would like to say that the core problem in our country that these steps are sustainable by a lack of sustainable domestic investment in monitoring in infrastructure and technical expert also problem in our country on the air pollution atmospheric pollution topic. And that speeds growing scientific and international efforts that it can have on the problem to solve of the air quality, improving the air quality in our city. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Lee. So let's move on from like what are these gaps to how can we actually close them and how could the UNDP toolkit help? Maybe one note to the panelists, we are running pretty massively behind schedule and I want to still keep a little bit of time for Q&A, so maybe try and limit it to, maybe less than 2 minutes would be great. Thank you. So, okay, to Farah. So given tight budgets, I think that we see all around the world right now, unfortunately, in all kinds of development activities, and obviously competing priorities. What approaches have you seen successfully help cities or communities start closing these monitoring gaps, even with limited resources? And how could potentially the UNDP toolkit reduce costs?
With limited resources, you need to start pragmatically and scale strategically. So one of our awardees from Gambia, the Permian Health, they started with literally one monitor. There was no monitoring stations in Gambia at that time. Today they have a network of 26 low-cost sensors and one reference grade monitor. So over the past few years, they have built quite a network and they've done that in a phased manner. They've used hybrid monitoring technologies. So I think that is one thing, phased and hybrid monitoring strategies that really work. You need to leverage partnerships and share infrastructure. So, for example, one of our awardees from Pakistan, I am so positive that with the funds that they received, they would not be able to install 160 low-cost network of 160 low-cost sensor networks. However, they did it by leveraging partnerships, dipping through, channelizing their financial resources from different places, funds, from their own funds that the government may have specifically allocated them. So that was one. Community-led monitoring, of course, works really well, where the communities take ownership not only of the data but also of the solutions. Integrating monitoring with health and development priorities. So integrating air quality data with other resources into other health and environmental policies, making it kind of indispensable, and building local capacity early. So you're not trying to build local capacity after you have deployed your network. It's much before that. Even before you begin planning, you need to keep all your stakeholders and you need to build those capacities early on. So even with limited resources, I think that's the way to go.
Perfect. Thank you, Farah. So over to Colleen. OpenAQ is built upon open data and open source principles from the start. And also the UNDP toolkit is actually licensed under a Creative Commons license. And do you believe that these open aspects could help closing the data gaps better than proprietary solutions? And if so, how?
Thanks, Achim. Definitely, if data and information are open, more people can use them for learning and training and many other things. People can build upon these open tools and even improve it themselves. Some of the benefits that we can see include increased innovation. So when air quality data are open and resources are open, everyone can help solve the urgent problem of polluted air. And many of the diverse knowledge of the different sectors can be built and lead to more innovative and durable approaches. Second one is increased collaboration and trust. So sharing non-private data, non-private information openly allows for more cooperation, facilitating knowledge sharing. And like I mentioned, people can improve upon these tools. Also increasing equity and empowering marginalized communities to access evidence about air quality disparities. An advocate for equitable approaches. Again, from the presentations today and examples that we've heard, many of the powered communities are able to kind of voice out through data and information. And then there's the demonstration of social responsibility and greater visibility. And again, this is for maybe companies that want to share their data. And open data ethos is growing, and many major entities like AirGradient are embracing the opportunity to share non-private data, non-private information that benefits society. And then lastly, all of these open greater funding opportunities. So again, that undercurrent of financial investments are there, and also there are funders like Epic that require or strongly encourage open data. So those are the benefits that we can see when data and information are open and shared in a manner that is that is open, and specifically mentioning that these requirements of either public domain or CC licenses.
Thank you, Colleen. So to Professor Lee, from a technical perspective, what approaches are most effective for improving coverage? For example, using low-cost sensors, combining them with modeling, or integrating satellite information. To what extent do open and transparent models have an advantage here?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question for this discuss. So I think in not only future but today we using our data to improve the knowledge, understand about the air quality in Hanoi already. And I think that on the most effective technical approach, the first thing about the low cost sensor network. And that is because low cost sensor is low cost sensor, right? And also we know about the advantage of low cost sensor. So we need to provide the high density high density to understand about the air quality by the rest of the city, and also the local data that is the local sensor can network and open for the community also. For calibrated and integrated with system with satellite data. And satellite data, you know that nowadays many kind of satellite, they can provide the data of air quality. So we can comparison between the local sensors data and satellite data. That can provide completed spatial coverage, and we can downscale to the ground level using the model, because you know that the satellite data is in the high level, okay, high layer of atmosphere, but the local sensor we using the ground level. So we need to calibrate, and we need to how to say the downscale for that, and after that we can compare using, because the human lives mostly they focus the air quality in ground level lower than 10 meter, okay, but the satellite data is very high layer, so we can downscale to the ground level first and using. And actually we using the data we collected from the local sensors equipment supported from yours, and we been using the how can I say the high split model to running and to understand where the air pollutant from west affected on the air quality in Hanoi, and hopefully that on next week, I'm not next week, the next time we will have the figure to show us where the air pollutant come from. And you know that last time I mentioned that we should be extend the period time to collect the data, because you know that on the 2nd September we have a big holiday, not holiday, not a big event for 80 independent of Vietnam. It's so that we should spend time to collect the data of air quality data to comparison with other events to know how the event is affected on the air quality, and hopefully at the presentation, and maybe on next time we hope that we can use a local sensor to measure air quality in some hotspot of air pollution, like in the crab village or rice store open burning or something like that. And advantage of open and transparent model we can use to understand about the air quality effect, and we can use the air quality that we collected, and we comparison with the health impact how is the impact on the health of community, so that we can think about that on future to determine it. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Professor Lee. So I will make one more round of questions, but just try to be spot on, because we have like 7 minutes left, and hopefully we have maybe 2 minutes left for a couple of questions, but I think they are already getting answered as well from our colleagues here. So I think what's really important, we talked about the gaps, we talked about the data. Now let's just quickly touch upon insights and action, because I think in the end what we need to do is like we need more action, we need reduced pollution. That means we have to trigger somehow behavior changes. So to Farah, how can communities translate new air quality measurements into decisions that support health and local priorities? What helps data actually influence behavior or policy?
Air quality monitoring is not about collecting numbers just for the sake of collecting. That needs to be, translated, and it needs to be shared. You need to design appropriate policies which have the potential to be implemented realistically. You can't just have some fancy idea of what it should be like. When measurement and interpretation of the air quality data and decision making are aligned, it is only then that air quality data becomes a powerful tool. How it can influence policy and behavior, I think there are three key things. One is data must answer a local or personal question. Does it affect me? How does it affect my closed ones? Is my city livable? Those are the kind of questions that it should be able to answer. Data must be translated, not just shared. So, for example, there's this one group in Malawi. They are integrating their data along with they're working with the Department of Meteorology and Climate Change in their country. And they're collaborating with the government to share or do air quality weekly forecasts. And they're integrating that as into the whole weather forecasting system. Along with that, they're giving air quality updates. So data needs to be translated. It's very simple to begin with, but I think it's an important step. And along with that, they give some public advice and recommendation along. They have these color-coded charts, which they link to a map showing which areas may experience what kind of air quality levels, etc. And along with a little bit of recommendation for the general public to understand and begin with. I think for Malawi, that has just started, putting together a network of sensors for the first time. I think that's very impressive. And I think that is one of the things. And the last thing is clear links between data and decisions. I'm going to go back to our awardee in Gambia because they have.
Sorry, I need to interrupt you here. We have only 3 minutes left, so I would like to move over to Colleen.
Okay,
because we have 2 more speakers here and very limited time. So, Colleen, from the perspective of open data communities, what tools or practices help turn raw measurements into insights or stories that motivate actions? Maybe we leave it on the first one.
Sure. I guess one of the biggest examples from our side is the OpenAQ Ambassador Program, where they are trained to translate all of the data that they've collected into stories for their own communities. The work that we do at OpenAQ is a little bit step back from interpreting the data ourselves, but we make these data actionable and, like I mentioned, programmatically accessible so that you can build upon these. And in addition to the tools, we provided trainings as well. So in addition to the work of aggregating the data, standardizing, harmonizing, folks can build upon those and then be able to interpret and tell their own stories and things like that. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Great, that was spot on. So Professor Lee, maybe just 1 or 2 sentences. How can you make science meaningful to support planning and policy making? Give us a very quick insight there. This would be great. I think you're muted. You have to unmute yourself. Professor Lee, you have to unmute. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that is okay. I have a quick response that the core principle that the community data must achieve with the scientific robustness to be the policy relevant, and key step including the core location and calibration of the data first to understand about our data is quality. And the QA and QC that it implement automatic and manual protocol for the data validation, and I would like to say that. And we need to contact metadata on systematical records metadata. And we need to transparent uncertainty qualification with a clear community communicate with data with precision, accuracy limit, because you know that the low cost sensor may face problem on the how to say the quality of data sometimes, for example, and so that we need to transparent and uncertainty of quality. Yeah, I would like to say that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Lee. Also to Colleen and Farah, thank you for participating in this panel. I'm sorry I had to rush you through a little bit in the end, but I give it over to Nasala if there are some questions left, or if you want to head into the closing remarks, Nasala.
Thank you, Achim. Thank you to all our panelists for this very grounded discussion. I believe most of the questions, thanks to the whole team, has been answering throughout this session, the panel session. So thank you to everyone. I feel like the question and answers are still going on, and there's some typing going on. So perhaps we can just leave it at that right now, because the questions, most of them have been answered. It was very nice to see all of these interest in further collaboration and the appreciative nature that you've shown towards the work that has been being done. So once again, I extend my thanks to everyone participating, all the speakers, all the panelists, and the audience for joining in. We see that both at UNDP Global Center and AirGradient, initiatives like the Low-Cost Air Quality Monitoring Toolkit is a part of a broader effort. We do want to bridge technology, policy, community action, and ultimately be able to serve people that supports sustainable development outcomes in the longer run. So please feel free to access the toolkit and learn more about the pilot through this QR code. Once again, a reminder that we will be sharing the recording with all the registered participants, and we will make it public. So we hope that you found this session insightful. Thank you once again for joining. Have a good day, evening from wherever you are.